Hello, hello, hello. It's Miriam from Yarnwork Studio, and guess what? In our fleece to sweater series that we've been working through, I finally have a finished skein of yarn. So this is 100 grams of my custom blend. So you can go back in the series, in the playlist, if you want to see how I came to this blend. It's been a lot of trial and error, a lot of sampling, and I've been documenting it kind of every step of the way. And now we're at the point where we actually have yarn, which means we can actually cast on our sweater. So this is my first finished skein. The specs on this, before I washed it and set it, so it's already been washed and set and finished. The specs on this are, I guess I haven't weighed it. So now let me pause. I'm going to weigh it. But it should be around 100 grams. For sure. And I got 500 yards out of this, which was pretty wild. Okay, so it's 111. Is that in frame? There we go. 111.53 grams. And I got just over 500 yards, which is amazing. What's interesting about that, interesting is an interpretive term here maybe, but for people who like the specs and the details the way I do. If you go back to the videos where I was sampling, I was thinking, and I think I wrote it down. Yeah, here it is. And yes, I have all my papers nearby. I was getting around 3 yards per gram. So if this weighs 111 grams, by this sample, which is a small amount, obviously it was 30 yards. It was a 10 gram sample, so it was a really small sample. I should have 333 yards on here, but I actually have over 500. So that goes to show you the difference between sampling a small amount, like 10 grams, and doing an actual full spin. So if we remember, and we can double check on this because I've got it all written down, which I have to go back and look because it's been so long since I actually did the sampling between then and actually finishing this skein. But life was lifing. So we had this whole mix, and you can go back to other videos to see the mix. But basically it's 20% alpaca, and then like the rest of it is a mix of different wools, CVM, merino, some Corriedale, cross with merino, and some random wool that's just called wool that I got carded from my local mill. I'm sure just like some leftovers that they mill together. That is 100% wool. So it's like an 80-20 blend of alpaca and wool, but the wool mix is a bunch of different stuff. But in this blend, when I sampled, I did a 10 gram sample. It turned out to be 30 yards, which means I get 3 yards per gram. Some people will do yards per pound, but I'm in Canada. I don't use pounds nearly as much as I use grams for weights of things. So this makes sense to me. It makes it easy to calculate. And then I have my swatch. So let me grab the swatch that came out with this, where I calculated my gauge. So this is the swatch of the color worked up. And we can see this looks quite close, quite similar. I did all the prep the same way. The only difference is with the 100 grams is I was able to sort of blend more of it. So I feel like there might actually be a little more evenness of color in this than in this. But either way, like this is it's rustic, it's soft. Again, stitch definition stuff isn't going to be a factor here because it's mainly going to be a stockinette cardigan, which is what this stitch is, with knits on the front and pearls on the back, done in rows. So these are the specs that I worked with my sample. So what I find interesting is 3 yards per gram there, but then I got over 500 yards when I should have got 333. But I have washed and set it. It is a 2-ply. That's what I landed on. And I do have more singles prepared, but I haven't got any more finished skeins. So what we're going to do in this one is we're going to look at these specs a little bit more in detail. Then I'm actually going to cake it up. And if we're lucky, depending on timing and everything on this video, I might actually cast on if I can find the right needles and everything, which I have not really prepared. So as a reminder, this was my control card that I made. Don't mind the painter's tape. I couldn't find clear tape, so it's not aesthetic, but it's functional. This is what my singles, roughly I wanted to keep my singles kind of to this. And I was doing long draw, so it's a woolen spun, which means it's lighter and airier and should be super warm as well, without being too dense. This was sort of my skinnier 2-plies. So it's obviously going to have ebbs and flows. It's hand spun. It's not perfect. It's perfect for me. So that was like one of my skinnier 2-plies, and this was one of my thicker 2-plies, and I want it to kind of stay in this range to feel confident about getting this gauge. This was my 3-ply, which I also sampled and swatched, but I decided in the end I liked the texture and feel of the 2-ply. I liked the way it drapes, so like how it kind of hangs. I like that it's a little bit transparent or translucent, whatever the right word is, a little bit unopaque, but not a lot. And I just liked the overall feel and look of this one. And then this was just my fiber sample. So when I do my bats, I kind of make sure that the consistency is right and I don't forget anything. But really what I'm going for as I spin is I try to make sure that my singles are staying in this range, and then as I'm plying, making sure that I'm kind of roughly matching these. And it's hard to see, and my phone won't refocus in this silly app that I have that allows me to actually pause on my iPhone. If anyone has a better iPhone solution where I can take one continuous video and not edit, but still be able to pause and stuff, let me know. I'm using Pause Cam. So you can actually see what the twist angle is what I'm trying to get at. And we can measure it with my tool here, but we don't need to get into that right now. Without further ado, let's open up this finished wash and set. There are a few spots where it's still like kind of kept its energy, I'll call it. But when I cake it up, that'll be no problem. You can also see it has a little bit of stickiness onto itself, which I think is great for sort of that rustic look I'm going for. There's not a lot of halo, and I'll pull the swatch out again. Halo being like the fuzziness. There's a tiny bit, actually a decent amount. You can kind of see it here on the video. But it's so beautiful to me because I don't like really furry things, especially if it's going to go on my bare skin. But I feel like this is just going to have the exact right amount of sort of drape that alpaca adds and a little bit of a halo to add sort of a little bit of a rusticness. Overall, I'm just super excited, and I'm very excited to finally actually have a finished skein here. But yeah, we can look at some samples here for where it's landed. It should be landing in a sport area. Of course, I'm doing it upside down. Maybe I'll just do it right side up. Maybe that would be better. It's definitely not lace. I would call it like a heavy fingering, or maybe even just a fingering. Like, again, you don't want to pull this tight to make it fit. So I think it's right in between a fingering and a sport. And one of the things that I did write down was my wraps per inch is 18. And you can see on here, 18 is like right in the split area between sport and fingering. So that's definitely all tracking very well. I think this is exactly what I want. And I can actually cake this up. I can cast on. We'll see if I'll do it all tonight. One video, or if I'll do it in separate videos. But I'm going to cake it. Maybe I'll bring you along for the caking. We'll see if I can get the camera set up to work. I'm in I did some rejigging of my workshop, which is in my unfinished basement. Maybe I'll give you a little preview. I've got my pegboard with my fiber colors, a little TV. All my tools are over here. This is one of my whips. I brought it down in case I need the needles from it to cast on. I don't know if I do. My materials, everything's here. And then there's a whole bunch of mess over there. Don't look. That's my unfinished basement and storage. But I will be back once this is caked, or I'll let you watch me cake it. We'll see once I move the camera around, because as you know, I don't edit. Low production value, hopefully high quality content. Okay, so good news. I feel like this angle is pretty good in the sense that you can see everything without seeing all the rest of my unfinished basement. This here is my really cheap, like $20 Amazon umbrella Swift. And I just want to make it super clear before we get into this part. I hate this thing. Okay, I have a really nice wooden one from Knit Picks, and long story short, this big pegboard fell on top of it one day unintentionally. Not a risk now, but back then it fell on it and it totally busted it. And I am still devastated right now, but I had won that in a Teal Yarn Crafts make along challenge. Yes, people actually win stuff in those things. And so I needed to do like a quick replacement option. But yeah, like I hate this one. It does the job, which is fine, but it's on my list to try to replace with something better at some point in the future. But I'm in no rush. And then I have this Stanwood needlecraft winder. I also got that from Amazon because I know people are going to ask. I used to have the Knit Picks one that I also won, and it busted a lot and I hated it. So this one's been really good to me. I'm going to say that, but inevitably, because I said that, something here is going to go terribly wrong, I'm sure. So now is the time for me to unclip and see if I can get a nice rhythm going on here. Just got the little infinity ties. So the hardest part for me is always getting that starting rhythm going. And I feel like I can already feel that this is a little bit tangled because it didn't go on my Swift. I have a different Swift that I wind it off the bobbin from. Ooh, I don't like how that's going, but I can do this. But let's see how tangled it goes. Okay, that seems pretty good. So I have a standard, I don't know what they call it, like Amish Swift maybe, that my husband turned into a yardage counter for me. I'll try to show that someday in a video. But when I pull it off the bobbin after it's been plied, I use that to count the yardage automatically. Okay, so I'm going to start doing this. It might get bumpy because I've got, I can already see it bumping a lot. But I'm just going to start doing this. And because it's bumping a lot, what I'll probably do is come back to you once I have my full cake, because otherwise this is going to cause potential issues for people watching because it's bumping, because it's on the same cart. But you can see the idea. I just turn this, it's turning that, and it's winding it into a cake that then I can knit from. Okay, so I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I did it. That took probably like 6 to 8 minutes would be my guess. And sometimes I wish, in a way I wish that I had actually been able to film that without it being too mobile, because it was not without issue. So I had a couple spots I needed to stop, and it's one of those things where if I capture it, I can talk through it. And y'all can see that not everything is perfect all the time in any knitting world or any fiber world. But one of the things that happened a lot was this little hook at the end, like the yarn can easily get up and under that as you're going. So I ended up like kind of holding the yarn coming off the Swift out here just to help pull it off the Swift straight this way and then feeding it in. So if I had another one of these sort of feeder things, I think that would be a helpful way to kind of help with that, but I just use my hand. So it would come off the Swift onto here, into there. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was at some point it just kind of went a little haywire here, which it can. But I did end up with a pretty nice caked up ball, and it's very big, right? Like it's very big, sizable. It's 500 yards of 2-ply beautiful yarn. Now I'm just going to switch back to my other view and contemplate at least talking about casting on. Okay, and we're back, and I checked my notes. Again, I'm checking my notes. My gauge on a 4mm, which is what I used here, US 6. The other thing I check always on my swatches is what I do is if it's a US 6, I will put 6 knots, so I can always remember when I'm looking at a thing what size it is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knots. Yes. So I have 6 knots in here. I'm not sure if you can see them all. There, maybe you can there. And that just reminds me that this was using a US 6, which is 4.0 millimeter. And now, moment of truth that I could have done beforehand, but guess what? I didn't. We're just doing it all live. These are my ChowGoo interchangeables that I bought from my local yarn store. I would recommend buying them through your local yarn shop because it's a great way to support them with a nice high price tag ticket anyways. And luckily my 4s are here, which are my US 6s, double checking. Yep. It must be my 3.75s that I'm using on that other whip, but I didn't feel like checking and remembering. So now I need a cable. This is the full set. I know people will ask. And I don't really care what cable length I use to cast on. I should have brought some stitch markers down, but I'm probably not going to do the full cast on in this video, but at least just cast on a few stitches so that we can see it. Why don't I have any pins in here to tighten? I may not be able to do anything without that. Let's see if we can get creative. So I pretty much exclusively knit on interchangeable circulars like this. I will magic loop for days, if you know, you know. Or I will constantly change the cables for the right length. But I just love the versatility of these guys. And I love my ChowGoos. I'm a ChowGoo girly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull out my pattern for a second. And if you'll remember, maybe you're new here, I don't know. I made this up based on the vision that I have, my swatch, and some math. And don't worry, there's a whole video with a whole bunch of math about how I got to some of the starting points at least. So I have written out the steps of my pattern, which means I can share it all I want because it's mine, which is kind of nice instead of saying go buy the pattern, because obviously I'm not going to share other people's work, but I can share my own work. I have no issue with that. So what I'll be doing at this point, casting on 122, and then I'm going to place markers around all these different ones. So 2 stitches, marker, all that sort of stuff. But for now, I'm just going to cast on the 122. For this cardigan, this sort of design I put together, which roughly will look something like this. I've got a whole Instagram highlight if you want to sort of go through the thought process and all the pattern recommendations. I'm still getting them in my DMs, which I think is so great. People are getting really invested in this journey with me. But again, if this like writing a pattern is, I'm not a pattern designer, but I do like math and I've knit a lot of things. So throughout the journey, if I at any point feel like it's not working, then I'm just going to scrap this and I'll use a pattern. So like, that's the beauty of knitting. You can always just rip it out and start again. You don't lose the materials the way you do if you're sewing or things like that, where you might not be able to recover them. So like, nothing's final, nothing's permanent. But the idea with this is I'm going to do like a pretty wide neck with almost no stitches in these front panels. And then I'm going to expand them kind of at this angle and range. So it's going to go like straight down and then over and out as the sort of front panel on each side. So picture this again mirrored over here. So, and then at the end, once I've done that, if I like the shape and everything, then I'm going to pick up all the way along, like up from the bottom, up here, over here, around the back of the neck, down here and down here. And that's going to get me to then I can add my button band, and I can be flexible with that as far as, you know, how thick or thin I make it, depending on how the fit is going. So that's kind of a nice option that at that point I can sort of finish it however I want, neck wise, button band wise, and all that. So depending on how it fits, it's like a nice way to forgive things that may not be hitting exactly how I want them to. But what that means is I'm probably just going to use a long tail cast on, because when I cast on, I'm going to be going basically from the front top here over to the front top here. And then I'm going to start knitting back and forth and expanding out through a yoke with this weird shape. I don't know if this makes sense to everyone, but again, this is not a how to knit. This is not a tutorial or anything. This is like, I'm a process person. I'm talking through my process. So this is basically the only thing I'm going to think about right now, casting on this. And then I do have the pattern written out all the way until I think, oh, I have it all the way to the end of the body. It's just right here. That's all this is. And we'll see, because along the way, I'm sure I'm going to change my mind. And I also need to make sure I have enough yarn for it. So if I got 500 yards out of 100 grams, and I have enough out of 111 grams, I have enough fiber. I have 700 grams of fiber that I can prep and card up and all that. And you can see that in my last video on how I do that. Then I should be good to go. But the thing here is, this was a really, really long and convoluted way of saying I need to cast on 122, and I'm going to use a long tail cast on because I don't need it to be particularly stretchy or anything. So to make sure when I'm casting on, to make sure I have enough yarn in my cast on, there's nothing worse than running out of yarn. I usually hold my needles double like this, and I I'll wrap around 20 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then I'll use that as a really rough estimate for this much yarn. We'll do 20 stitches. Then I'll double it up and I'll say, okay, so that would be 40 stitches. That would be 60. That would be 80. That would be 100. That would be 120. So if I start casting on here, I have enough yarn end here, working yarn or yarn end, to get to 122 stitches. And then because I'm me, I go like this. No, let's take some extra. And then I always end up with way too much. But I'd rather have way too much than not enough. I'm also seeing already some pretty thin spots, like right here. All right, so I'm going to cast on here. Again, this is not a knitting tutorial, and guess why? I'm not really a knitting teacher. I do love showing people things. I start with a slip knot. I guess I'm going to slow down. I start with a slip knot where I go like this. This is my working yarn attached to the ball. This is my tail. And I bring that over, slip it over like this. That's not even in focus. I got to stay down here. Okay. So I have my slip knot, working yarn over here, yarn tail over here. I grab it like this. And okay, working yarn up here, yarn tail down here. Going into my yarn tail like this, grabbing the working yarn, pulling it through. That's one, but because I did a slip knot, that's also one. So that's 2, 3, 4. Oh, missed it, of course, because I was getting in a groove. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, it's very important for me to say this. If you are a beginner and you happened upon this video and you are watching it and you are thinking, oh my gosh, it takes me so much longer to do that, don't worry about it. This is just practice. It's just practice. And maybe you're watching it and you're a beginner and you're like, yeah, I can do it that fast, no problem, which is awesome. So casting on sometimes at the start feels super weird, and it's all muscle memory and you just get used to it. So I did 10. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do 122. Then I'm going to place my stitch markers on the next row. So I'm going to flip it, be purling, and then I'm going to start doing my increases that I have planned, and we'll see where we land. So if you want to get more regular updates, if you are invested, like some people definitely are, and I love hearing from you in comments or on DMs and Instagram or whatever. I am on TikTok. I don't post there as much. But I do go live there sometimes, at least I used to, and I probably will again soon. But if you want to get more regular updates, that's probably where to do it. I have it all tucked in a highlight called F2S, which is Fleece to Sweater, same as the title of these videos. So you can sort of watch the progress over time or keep an eye on my stories. I'm mostly a stories poster, not posts, but I do posts. I do posts sometimes. That was a mouthful. Anyways, I hope if you're still here, you're excited by this. I will be checking in periodically. I've got to continue spinning and knitting, but at least it's officially, as of right now, on the needles. And that is a big step in a hand spun sweater project. Off the needles will be a very big step later, but we're going to go with our custom pattern, see how it goes, and I'll see you in the next update. Bye.